in this episode of the Alpha X podcast.
That's a misconception that I think people should get out of their heads, that just because you look good, you'll be a great fighter, or you'll even move really well, or feel better. If you look good, that's all it is. You look good. The other things may or may not be there. When you step on the mat in a real fight, or you step inside the cage, you're literally fighting for your life. And the only way to develop that is to put yourself in that situation again and again, where you feel like you can't go on anymore, but then you force yourself to just jump in and do one more round, and then one more round, and then one more round.
Improve your health. Optimize your nutrition. Perform at your peak level. Increase your lifespan. Build a powerful mindset. This is Jay Parekh, and welcome to the Alpha X podcast. Welcome to the Alpha X podcast. Now, in today's episode, I have a guest with me who really is somebody that I could go on and talk for hours. Like, we're both very passionate about, optimal performance. Specifically, how do you get your body to be as strong as possible, as powerful as possible, as fast as possible? How do you improve your conditioning, endurance, stamina? What goes into all of these things? So there's a lot we're going to be covering, but just to name a few, we'll be covering, how martial arts can improve your fitness. What's wrong with the bodybuilding style of training and what you should be doing instead. We're also going to be covering my guest's training routine. So, by the way, he is a professional fighter, a professional MMA fighter, and he competes out of One Warrior Series, which is the largest promotion in Asia and the second largest in the world. So, what does he do when he's in his fight camps and when he's getting ready to go into a match? So, we'll be covering that. And we're going to be going into the science of the energy systems. So we all have three different energy systems, and we're going to be talking about how you should train each energy system, why you should train each energy system, and what is it about these energy systems that's important, and why, if you want to have the maximum utilization and optimization of your body, you need to pay attention to all these three different energy systems. Finally, we're going to be covering the secret behind a warrior mindset. So tonight's episode is going to be something really awesome. I'm going to be introducing my guest. Let's get right down to it. My guest tonight is one of the veterans of the Indian MMA community. He's the first Indian to fight in the One Fighting Championship. He's a bronze medalist at the Bangkok BJJ Open, a national kickboxing gold medalist, Evolution Grappling Indian Open gold medalist, first and only Indian to win a medal at the World Professional Jiu-Jitsu Championship in Abu Dhabi. He's been a referee and official at the Yodha Fighting Championship, National Jiu-Jitsu Championship gold medalist, represented India at the Asian Beach Games in Vietnam. In 2018, he won gold medal at the ADCC Singapore. In 2018, Dumao BJJ Championship, he won a silver medal. In 2018, Carlson Gracie Cup, silver medalist in Bangkok. And since 2019, he's a contracted fighter with the One Warrior Series. Currently, he's the assistant coach for Team India at Gamma MMA World Championship, and he's also a certified MMA referee with them. He's a BJJ purple belt, and he is also a nutrition and strength and conditioning nerd like myself. So, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome my coach and very good friend, Susovan Ghosh. How are you doing, Susovan?
I'm doing great, Jay, and thanks for having me today.
The pleasure is all mine. It's really amazing everything that you've accomplished over the last. I think it's been 10 years that you've been into mixed martial arts now.
Yes, 10 years.
And you are also an assistant coach with Team Relentless with Jitendra Khare, who was here with us a few days ago.
Yes, absolutely.
Awesome. Susovan, I wanted to, in fact, speak to you a little bit about how you got started. I asked Vicky sir also a similar question when we was kicking off the conversation. So let's talk a little bit about it. How did you get into fighting? And what were you doing before? And how did this happen?
So very honestly speaking, my first memory of learning about martial arts was actually hearing it from my father. So not many people know my father was one of the people who started training in martial arts when karate was first introduced in India. But unluckily, he got injured during practice, which ended his martial arts training and kind of put a fear in the hearts of my family members that training in martial arts means getting injured. So I was not allowed to train in martial arts when I was in school, when I was in college. But like many other young people, I guess what really inspired me to train in martial arts, and this might sound funny, was Bruce Lee. You see
Right.
all these movies of Bruce Lee and him beating up like 20 goons effortlessly, and at some point of time, you want to do that. And I mean, if everybody is honest with themselves, and I think everybody wants to do that at some point of time, at least when you're young.
I mean, I do agree with that. I mean, fighting has always been a part of human culture. I think
True,
I think wrestling is the oldest sport in the world. If I'm not wrong, I think I've read that somewhere. And
right,
it's an innate part. Like fighting is an innate part, an innate human instinct. It's fight or flight, and that there is a
right.
reason why it's fight or flight.
The problem is in India, fighting is not really a part of our culture. You know, uh,
Mm.
most of India.
Mm.
Um, as a kid, nobody like if you look at America, right? They have a wrestling culture. If you look at
Mm.
Japan, judo is a part of their school curriculum. But in India, we are mostly stuck with cricket.
Yeah.
So, as a youngster, if you tell your parents that you want to join a cricket club, that's fine. But if you say that you want to do boxing or you want to do judo or wrestling, then most parents are slightly taken aback. So, I had to wait till I was actually in engineering college before I got a chance to uh, join my first martial arts club. And I started with karate. I spent about 4 years there, but like many places in many schools in India, the focus was not really on sparring. And as you know, that unless you spar, you're not really learning martial arts. I mean, you're just learning some movements which
Yeah.
look like martial arts, but you're
They
not
look
really
really
learning
cool.
martial arts.
They look really cool, but
Absolutely,
they're not they're
absolutely,
not practical.
yes.
Yeah.
So when I finally came to Bombay to pursue my MBA, that's when I met Vicky. So that's when I got introduced to MMA, and my true journey in martial arts started.
Awesome. How old were you when you started, by the way? Like your core training?
I started in 2009, so I was already 27 years old.
Wow. And I think a lot of people might think that that's too old to start a career into
Hmm.
into the fight world, right?
Hmm.
What would you say to those people?
Um, so it's both right and wrong
Mm-hmm.
because I feel that if you are looking to become a world champion athlete,
Mm-hmm.
you want to compete at the highest level, like
Mm-hmm.
say the UFC, the ADCC.
Mm-hmm.
It always helps if you start young, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, However, there is no right age to start martial arts or pursue it as a career, and you can see that with both Vicky sir and myself, right? You can
And
start
me. I mean, I've pretty much started at
and
the
you,
same age.
yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right, right. So you can start whenever you want, but it helps if you start young. That's what I'm gonna say.
Right. And were you always like physically fit otherwise? I mean, so guys, I'll probably, if you're watching this on YouTube, there's a picture of Susovan that I'm gonna put up there in the cover art, so you'll know what I'm talking about. But I think Susovan is one of the like the strongest and best looking martial artists out there. Like he has this is an amazing physique, and I don't know, Susovan, were you always that fit? Were you always like that, or is this something that developed through your training? And how did that happen?
Not really. So I've always been lean. I've
Mm-hmm.
always had low body fat percentage, but I wasn't never really strong because I never played any sports when I was in school or college. I was always into debate and quiz and all that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think you couldn't say that I was fit. I mean, I wasn't fat. I
Mm-hmm.
wasn't, overweight or anything, but in the true sense of the word, I wasn't fit. So the fitness came with the martial arts training. You know, to be honest, once I started competing actively, that is
Mm-hmm.
when you really get into the grind of things, right? You're
Yeah.
training twice a day, you're doing your strength and conditioning. That is when the actual fitness starts developing. So to answer your question, I wasn't always fit. Uh, I I got it through martial arts training. Yeah.
And I think now you are also helping other athletes and even like like just general like everyday people with their strength and conditioning, with building their bodies up, their physiques up. Tell us a little bit about how that happened, and what do you do there?
So when I started training, I realized that good knowledge is hard to come by, especially in India.
Yeah.
Uh, the, so one part was the martial arts knowledge, and one part was the strength and conditioning knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
Now we were lucky enough to train with really knowledgeable people. It started with Darren De Silva of Fight G. We had Dennis Holman of the UFC coming to train us. We had JJ Ambrose coming down from Thailand at that point of time to train us. So the technical knowledge was slowly dripping in, right?
Mm-hmm.
The slow collection of technical knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, the strength and conditioning for a fighter, that
Mm-hmm.
knowledge was truly lacking.
Right.
Um, Now, the world has really moved on. I mean, if you look at the works of people like Joel Jameson or
Mm-hmm.
Lauren Lando, they have
Mm-hmm.
devoted their whole lives to developing a strength and conditioning program for fighters.
Right.
I mean, we all know how well conditioned an athlete Mighty Mouse is.
Mm-hmm.
But the problem is in India, we are still doing those bodybuilding split workouts. One leg day, one back bicep day, one chest shoulder day, and then if you have some time, you spend like half an hour on the treadmill, slow jog.
Right.
So that is what a person's strength and conditioning routine consists of.
No, so I was saying, like, why do you think that's wrong? What's wrong with that kind of a strength and conditioning routine? I'm talking about from a perspective of a fighter, but we'll do that, and then we'll also talk about, even the general population. But let's talk about fighters first. So what's wrong with that?
So the wrong with what was wrong with that is the focus.
Mm-hmm.
The focus for an athlete or even a general population member
Mm-hmm.
should be movement and not muscle, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't really care if I don't know, my rear delts are less developed if I can do what I need to do.
Right.
So if you look at people who are training at the gym, you
Mm-hmm.
can, in my opinion, divide them into three categories, right? You have those bodybuilders or physique competitors, you
Mm-hmm.
have general population clients, and then you have athletes.
Mm-hmm.
Now, each of these populations should follow a different training protocol. The
Mm-hmm.
bodybuilder, because of his profession, needs to focus on individual muscles. I mean, he needs to go into the gym and he needs to look at the mirror, say, okay, you know what, my forearms look less developed today, so maybe I'll do a little
Right.
bit of extra forearms this month. And that's absolutely
Right.
fine for him.
Right.
But if you take an athlete and you put him in that kind of a workout, that's a recipe for disaster.
Right.
What we are looking to work with in an athlete, number one is full body strength through compound movements, right? I don't want to do a lot of isolation movements. I want to stick to the big three, the variations of the squat, the deadlift, the bench press.
Mm-hmm.
I want to develop explosiveness through safe training methods. I feel that perhaps doing too many overhead snatches is not the best thing to do for an MMA athlete because it's not an overhead sport.
Right.
There are
Right.
safer methods. You can do med ball slams. You can do kettlebell swings. There are a bunch of different methods which are safer than doing
Mm-hmm.
Olympic lifts, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Then again, if you are a general population client, you want to be focusing a lot on your fundamental movements, your squat, your lunge, your hinge, push, pull, rotate, gait, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
movements that will uh, translate into day-to-day life. We call it the activities of daily living.
Mm-hmm.
So, and honestly speaking, a general population client, along with looking good, the focus of training should be better movement capacity later in life. I mean, what's the
Yes.
point of looking good and you look very muscular, very fit now, and then by the time you hit 60, you look like a wreck. And
Correct. You
no
feel like
offense,
a wreck.
yes, and no offense to all the bodybuilders out there. I mean, you guys have a very tough sports, but
Mm-hmm.
look at what happened to Ronnie Coleman, right?
Mm-hmm.
Mm, I mean, eh, like you look like a beast in the gym when you're
Mm-hmm.
at your peak, and then as your body starts aging, as your muscles and your ligaments start deteriorating, it falls
Mm-hmm.
apart.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Mm-hmm.
if you say that, you know what, I mean, I'm a bodybuilder and that's a risk that I'm willing to take, then that's fine. But a
Right.
general population client should not be training like that.
Right, right. So the difference being that the goal of the training is different. For an athlete, it's to to perform better in their sport, which means certain movements, certain forms of explosivity, certain levels of endurance. For somebody in the general population, it's about more about improving the quality of your life, improving the quality of your
Absolutely.
life and living a longer life,
Right.
and a healthier life. I always say that it's not about improving just the lifespan of a client, but it's also about improving their health span so that, they live longer, but they also live healthier for a longer period of time,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
right? So, when you were getting ready, so let's talk about fighting first, and I want to know, like, what did your routine look like, especially when you were getting ready to get in the ring. And for everyone out there, just explain to them what it takes to get physically ready to fight. What where do you need to be, physically, to be ready to get in the cage.
Um, so one of the things that we always believe in Team Relentless is that you should be in training throughout the year. We say uh, never be out of camp, and that way you don't have to get in camp to get ready for a fight. You're
Mm-hmm.
always in training. You're always maintaining that base level of fitness.
You're always in
Uh,
shape.
you're always in shape. At
Mm-hmm.
least you're 70% of your fight shape, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that you can
Mm-hmm.
just push that extra 30% during fight camp.
Mm-hmm.
That said, I believe for me and for a lot of fighters training out of Team Relentless, a typical training day will have two training sessions. Ideally,
Mm-hmm.
one would be based on grappling and one would be a little more striking focused.
Mm-hmm.
And then some sort of a small strength and conditioning session,
Mm-hmm.
right? Most of the days, what we do is we incorporate the strength and conditioning workout as a part of the session itself.
Mm-hmm.
But then some days are also specialized, especially if you are doing a heavy weight training day, then that session is separate from your two martial arts training sessions.
Right. Right. So
And
you're doing about 2 sessions a day, what, 6 or 7 days a week?
um, so I would say more like 4 days a week.
Mm-hmm.
Two of the days is one training session, and then a very light maybe bag work or pad work session, or maybe a long jog.
Right.
And then I personally take a day off
Mm-hmm.
to help with the recovery.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, a lot of fighters of Team Relentless, they choose to train 7 days a week too.
Yeah, yeah. They're just always going, just no
Yes.
rest, no nothing, just always going. But I think what they
Yes.
do is they also kind of switch up the intensity of the training, right? So even
Absolutely.
though you're still training, but you're kind of
Mm.
recovering because you're backing off, you're like lifting the leg the bit of the accelerator pedal, and just
Right.
backing off
Right.
just a little bit. Yeah, makes
Right.
makes complete sense. In fact, I don't know about you, but for me, when I was getting into shape to fight, when I first decided to get in the cage, it was about just making sure that my body doesn't fall apart because I had a few injuries, like my shoulders are pretty banged up, and I just had to make sure that in the ring, number one, I had the stamina to keep going all the rounds, and number two is that my I didn't end up injuring myself. Did you face any
Right.
any challenges like that?
So yes, when we first started training, so to be very honest, we didn't have much knowledge about recovery workouts, or
Mm-hmm.
switching up the intensity to kind of give the body a little break here and there. So we were
Mm.
always just going, going, going. It was 100% every day
All
throughout
the
the camp,
time. Yeah,
all the time.
365.
Yes. Yes. So the problem with that is, you slowly start getting these minor injuries which kind of add up
Yeah.
to, and then suddenly one day, your knee pops or something happens.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so one of the things that we've started doing over the years, and I believe the person we have to thank for that was our wrestling and MMA coach, Mr. Nick Kilstein.
Mm-hmm.
So he introduced the idea of recovery workouts. You know,
Mm-hmm.
So some of the days you work out to not stress your body too much, but just move around to allow blood flow into your muscles and just help you recover actively. So you're
Mm-hmm.
not really taking a break that day completely. Your mind is still working, but you're not taxing your body too much.
Right. And do you use these with like the clients that you work with, which are not athletes, just people generally trying to be fit? Do you think this could be helpful for people like that?
Absolutely, absolutely.
What?
Especially if somebody is training, say, 5 days a week,
Mm-hmm.
then these kind of workouts definitely help. But
Mm-hmm.
then if somebody is training, say, 3 days a week at moderate intensity,
Mm-hmm.
then he doesn't really need recovery workouts. I mean, his body is getting the recovery it needs because of the way his training is scheduled.
Right, right, right. Makes sense. I like to include them even for people who are maybe working out 3 days a week, just so that they're doing a little bit more of movement every day. Like even if they're doing a little bit of recovery, maybe 10, 15, 20 minutes active recovery. A, it helps them recover better, and B, they're still moving every day, which is a good habit to have, and they're burning more calories as well. So
Right,
I think it helps them reach their goals. So it's just something that and they are surprised that, oh, I don't need to go 100% every day. Like I can get great
right.
results by just doing 100% maybe 1 or 2 times a week, and the
Mm,
other days are just active recovery, or a little bit of cardio, a little bit of running, and stuff like that. So I think
mm.
that's another good thing that I think it's a myth, for a lot of people out there that needs to be busted. And I think there are a lot of other myths out there, right? Like this in the training world.
Yes, there are, because the problem is that only now when somebody does a certain research abroad is it's easily available on the internet.
Mm-hmm.
But that's been for what, the last 5, 10 years maybe. uh,
Yeah.
Before that it was all just something somebody said, and you heard that from somebody training at the gym, that what, this is a good way to train, and you
Right.
pick that up and you pass it on to 10 people, and soon that becomes the rule.
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
Luckily, I think we are past that phase, because a lot of trainers, they're traveling abroad, they're training with very big names in the fitness industry. And yeah, I think we're slowly seeing the Indian fitness industry change
Mm-hmm.
from what it was.
I think the one of the ones that used to irk me the most is not to squat below parallel. Oh my God, hated that. Anytime someone would stop me squatting in the gym and like, nahi, nahi, you're doing it wrong. This is you're squatting below, knees kharab ho jayenge, and you spoil your knees. It really irked me, to sit down and want to explain. And eventually, I just gave up, man. I couldn't do it. And like, okay, you do you, I'll do me.
So one of my favorites, I won't say favorite, but one of the stories that goes around in our gym, and it comes from my coach Vicky sir, is apparently he walked into a gym and he was doing deadlifts, and
Mm.
the trainer there walks in and says, "Sir, this movement is banned in our gym. You're not allowed to do deadlifts." And it's a very famous gym. I'm obviously not going to name the person who runs it, but
Mm.
yeah, I mean that shows the kind of ideas that people have in the Indian fitness industry.
Yeah, yeah, but we're getting there. We're changing, and I mean, people like you are the ones that are leading the fray. I personally believe because I've seen you working yourself and working with other people in the gym, and there's a method behind everything that you do. There's a reason behind every set and every rep, and we're not wasting a single moment in their training. Every moment is spent like doing something. Tell me, what is the difference between like training for a fighter and training to look good, or training to just feel good and be healthy? What's the difference between the two?
So I would say there are actually three things that you said. One was looking good, one
Mm-hmm.
was being a fighter, and one is feeling good.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I mean, you can look great and not feel great.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, one of the problems in the Indian fitness industry is actually worldwide is the rampant use of performance enhancing drugs. You
Mm-hmm.
know,
Mm-hmm.
uh, recently, even a couple of years back, we had a couple of deaths from steroid overuse.
Mm.
So, if somebody is using steroids, he can look great, but then not feel or actually be great.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And
Absolutely.
then you have the fighters.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Even for the fighters, because of the way we train, we are always training at a very high intensity.
Mm-hmm.
So even the fighters, most of the fighters look great,
Mm-hmm.
but if you are really training at that intensity, if you are a really world class athlete, you will have nagging injuries. That's just the truth of the matter.
Yeah, I think everybody in the in the ring is I mean they're nursing some injury or the other, but that's just the way it is. And I mean, if you wait to be 100%, you're not going to have much of a career. That's just the observation that I've had.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, if you're and this is a contact sports, right? Every day we
Yeah,
come in, uh, we are trying to hurt each other.
yeah,
I mean, we can try to be as safe as possible, but my training partners are always trying to hurt me, and I'm trying to hurt them back.
right.
And somewhere something happens, and you end up with an injury. That's just a part of the game.
True.
And then you have,
There
yeah,
is something that you forgot. You could look great and be a shit fighter. And
absolutely.
we've seen a lot of examples of that.
Yes. The problem is, you know what, Jay? Uh, if you look at fighters abroad,
Uh-huh.
um, 80% of their training, or even 90% of their training, is to improve as a fighter,
Mm-hmm.
right? Only 10% may be those performance enhancing drugs or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So putting it in perspective of somebody who is not a fighter, if you have a 100 kg squat, some performance enhancing drugs can make it maybe 105 or 110,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people mistakenly believe that if they have a 50 kg squat, taking too
Mm.
many steroids will give them a 100 kg squat.
Mm. Mm.
That's not going to happen. I mean, you can't have shitty techniques. You can't uh, lack the heart to be a fighter and believe that courage comes out of a bottle. It doesn't.
Yeah.
You have to lay the base work. You have to do the work that's needed.
You have to put
Uh,
in the work that's needed. I completely. I've
Absolutely.
seen you school people who are like twice your size in the gym, you know, and it's amazing when I see that, and I think a lot of people don't understand or don't see that fighting isn't about being just strong or big, or like the biggest guy in the room is not necessarily the best fighter. I've seen people, like I've seen Goody, like Akshata in our gym, who's a
Absolutely.
50 kg like a woman, and she's schooled like on a regular basis. She schools like the men who are like almost, I don't know, like 50% more body weight than her, and she can school them.
Absolutely. And that's a problem that uh, we have in the Indian scenario, because, and no harm in saying this. I went to watch a couple of SFL events,
Mm-hmm.
and there were fighters. I mean, there were world-class fighters who didn't look ripped, and people
Mm-hmm.
were saying, "What kind of a fighter is this? He doesn't even look like a fighter." And that
Right.
guy, maybe an ex-UFC fighter, or he's fought in Bellator. He's won like multiple medals. I mean, look at
Mm-hmm.
Fedor.
Yeah.
Uh, like, he's just a
Dad bod.
chubby-looking guy.
Dad bod.
Yeah,
Pretty much.
true. But we all know what he can do.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. So.
So yeah, that's a misconception that I think people should get out of their heads, that just because you look good, you'll be a great fighter,
Mm-hmm.
or you will even move really well, or feel better. If you look good, that's all it is. You look good. The other
Yeah.
things may or may not be there. If you look,
Exactly.
if you think about what about people who want to feel good and move better, for them, a lot of focus has to be on developing the right energy systems and a lot of mobility work along with strength.
So
You know,
let's talk about these energy systems. Like what are the main energy systems and how can someone go about developing them? And also, let's keep in mind fighters, but let's also keep in mind like, people just generally living day to day life. What's the advantage that they have? Because I've been reading up a little bit on these things. I think this would be an interesting topic to talk about. And a lot of people have no idea that they have different energy systems, and these energy systems are responsible for doing different things for them, and they can use them to improve their lives.
right. So, I mean, this is actually a huge topic, and one of the
Yeah.
masters of this topic was Joel Jamieson. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
most of what I learned has come from him. So, the best way to describe it is, if somebody may be great at marathon,
Mm-hmm.
but may not be a good sprinter. So they have cardio. They both have cardio. A sprinter also has good cardio. A marathon runner has good cardio. So what changes? What changes is the energy system. See, a marathon runner, he has a very well developed aerobic energy system, right? Or oxidative energy system.
Which
So he
basically
can just
uses oxygen, right? That's
oxygen.
it's something
Yes.
that can be used to go longer, but is the primary fuel being fat, which is oxidized by oxygen, obviously.
Uh, but the problem with that is that doesn't give you a very large burst, the whole duration of a marathon, right? So the
Yeah.
energy systems that are used for sprinting or for explosive bursts of energy are the anaerobic systems, which again
Mm-hmm.
are two, the lactic and the alactic.
Mm-hmm.
One uses glycogen, one uses phosphagen,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Right.
Um, Now, if we look at a fighter,
Mm-hmm.
the first thing that a fighter should develop is the aerobic energy system,
Mm-hmm.
because that is what helps the other energy systems recover.
It's like the foundation.
It is the foundation. That is the energy system that's going to remove all the, when you train or you fight and you feel this burn in your muscles, that's the lactic acid buildup. The
Mm-hmm.
only way the lactic acid is going to get removed from your muscles is by the aerobic energy system.
Right.
So
Absolutely.
if you don't have a well developed aerobic energy system, it means you're not recovering fast between the rounds or even between explosive bursts of energy.
Right.
Uh,
Absolutely. So you're going to tire out much faster in let's say in the cage and you're fighting, and you grab onto someone, and you're having a struggle, and then let's say finally you let go. You're gassed. That's not the place you want to be in. You want to be able to recover from that.
Completely. Absolutely. And from a personal experience, it's a horrible place to be in, because when you're scrambling, when the pace is high, you feel fine. But the
Mm-hmm.
moment the pace slows down, you back off, maybe you're circling the cage, you feel like you're about to die. And
Yeah.
I have experienced this so many times. And initially, when I didn't know about energy systems,
Mm-hmm.
I used to wonder what's going on. I mean, I'm fine when the pace is high, but I mean, it feels like I'm gonna have a heart attack when I slow
Yeah.
down.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And this is actually the reason why I think, a lot of people that might look great,
Yeah,
may not, may not even have the gas tank, or may not be able to even last a single round in the cage. And I've seen that happen so many times. These big buff guys, they'll walk into the gym, and they'll try a class or two, and then by the they'll roll a couple of rounds, spar with us a couple of rounds, and then they're done, because that's they just don't have the energy system developed well enough to recover.
right, right. And talking a little bit more about the aerobic energy system, now, the simplest way to develop that is through long distance running, right?
Yeah.
And if you look at Muay Thai fighters, if you look at boxers, they do their road work every single day. You've trained in Thailand, so
Mm-hmm.
if you join a Muay Thai club, they will make you run, especially if
Yeah.
you want to fight,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Now, although they might not know it, why they're doing it scientifically, but that's just the simplest way to develop your aerobic energy system. Uh, Not the best, but the easiest one to follow, right?
Yeah.
Um,
When I went to Phuket top team to train in Phuket, they had a sign right outside: "Don't be lazy, do your morning runs," or something like on those
Absolutely,
lines. So yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really important to build that aerobic base, and it also, I think, develops your heart. I think it's really good.
Yes,
That's why it's called cardio. I mean, from a
yes,
general population point of view, it is something that could help people really improve their cardiovascular health. And
right,
also help them
right.
feel and recover and feel younger. Of course, there are better ways of doing it, like you said, because running too much can also be really can have other, like there are studies out there where they have shown that it kind of diminishes the connective tissue in the knees, like it really has a problem. Have you had any experience with that, or have you heard of something like that?
So when I first started running, I experienced these shin splints
Hmm.
uh, because I was doing road work.
Mm-hmm.
I was running on the road, and that's not the most forgiving surface.
Absolutely. The concrete.
So the concrete, yeah. So if you have never run before, you want to start running, the best place to do is find a joggers park or a green park, which the
Mm-hmm.
surface is soft.
What about sand, like beaches?
So sand again has its own challenges. I mean, I know it looks great in the movies,
Mm-hmm.
but if you have a weakness in your ankle, then the sand is the last place that you want to run on.
Really? Because
Yes.
being in Bombay, I used to go to the beach a lot to run. But you're saying that's not such a
Right.
good idea.
If you have great ankle strength and all, I don't. So I'm saying this from personal experience.
Uh-huh.
Every time I used to, a couple of years back, we used to do these weekend beach workouts. And every time we did these weekend batch workouts uh, on the beach, I
Mm-hmm.
would end up with an ankle pain. So I went to a physio, Dr. Prakash Roff, and he said, you have a slight weakness in your ankle. So every time your foot sinks into the sand, you're
Mm-hmm.
kind of stressing that weak joint. So
Wow.
you have to be very careful if you're running on the sand.
That's
I mean,
interesting.
if your body allows it, that's great.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, other than that, I would stick to the joggers park
Like a
or even
track.
a track. Yes, a running
Right.
track.
Right. So I guess for people who aren't facing, pain, it's okay. But for people who are, like figuring, like wondering why after running on the beach, suddenly their ankles or their legs start to hurt, then this might be something that they need to change.
Yes, yes.
Interesting. Interesting.
And also,
And
like
yeah.
talking about the aerobic workout, I mean, that's one of the first things that, a general population client should work towards. Because, like you said, it strengthens the heart. And
Mm-hmm.
if you look at the other energy systems,
Mm-hmm.
most people in their day-to-day lives are not going to go there. They're not going to do these 10-second high-intensity
Bursts.
bursts of activities.
Mm.
You know, that's mainly for the athletes.
Right. And there's,
So,
I think the chances of injuries also increase when you're doing a lot more explosive work. I mean, of course, there are easier and safe ways to do it, but
right,
the chances of injury is always going to be there when you're doing explosive work.
right, right. And that is one of the problems that we have with a lot of people training, is that they're doing a lot of these high intensity glycolytic work because they
Yes.
want to feel tired.
Yes, yes, yes. All those group classes, those boot camps, those, I had a client one time, who had an MCL tear in his knee,
Right,
and he wanted to do jumps and stuff, while working out, and I said that's really
right,
not a good idea because,
right.
you know, but he wanted that, so I refused to
Yes,
train him actually. I didn't want to get involved in that because I don't want to be responsible for him injuring himself again.
right. That is what Firaz Zahabi calls the fatigue seeking culture. And he
Yeah.
was describing the culture that CrossFit has developed, is that we are seeking fatigue instead of seeking to become better.
Yes, yes, I agree. Absolutely. Absolutely. The goal of training is to improve, to get better, to improve your physical fitness, improve your mindset, improve the quality of your life. You know.
Right,
Tell
right.
me a little bit about the mindset, Shushovan, that is really important when it comes to fighting, and maybe I don't know I don't know about you, but in my experience, like the kind of life lessons that I've learned on the mats is it's helped me everywhere, because difficulty and adversity strikes you at the most inopportune times, just like fighting. You don't
Right,
expect it and suddenly it's there. Like right now, for example, we're in this lockdown, and we've got this pandemic situation, and suddenly overnight our worlds shifted, and that's a lot like fighting. Like you could be doing great, and then suddenly somebody just takes you down and you're on the ground and you've got fists flying at you.
right,
What is
right.
the toughness that you've developed? How have you developed it? And what have you learned from fighting, like from a mental standpoint?
So I think the toughness comes from the training itself. I mean, although there are many mental exercises that you can do to
Hmm.
develop that mental toughness, but the majority of it will come from that day-to-day grind. You get into the ring, get on the mat, and you grind it out. Every day, somebody's trying to take you down. Somebody is trying to take your head off, or choke you out.
Mm-hmm.
Fighting out of it, getting to a better position. That is what develops that never say die attitude.
Mm-hmm.
And what people need to understand is, when you step on the mat in a real fight, or you step inside the cage,
Mm-hmm.
you're literally fighting for your life. You know,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and the only way to develop that is to put yourself in that situation again and again, where you feel like you can't go on anymore, but
Mm-hmm.
then you force yourself to just jump in and do one more round, and then one more round, and then one more round. Now, initially, when you first start off, you might break. We call it breaking, right? You break mentally in maybe the first 2 minutes,
Mm-hmm.
and then after maybe a month, that goes up to 3 minutes, and slowly you develop that capacity where you can stay mentally strong for the whole duration of the fight. Now, of course, there are visualization techniques where you visualize yourself winning, you visualize how the fight's gonna go, or even getting out of bad situations. But
Mm-hmm.
all that is secondary. What is most important is the daily grind. I mean, that is what is going to develop that attitude. When you're beaten down and you're in a bad spot, that desire to fight back, that is going to be developed in the gym itself.
So, I was reading this book by Ryan Holiday called Stillness is the Key. And he was talking about Tiger Woods' story. I just read this yesterday. And, his dad used to pretty much put him through hell when he was training him to be a world-class golfer.
Right,
Tiger Woods became like one of the youngest, golf champions in the world. And the way that
right,
they achieved that was, when he was growing up, his dad would literally belittle him and force him to keep going on. And it's
right.
funny, and I'm not saying this is healthy or this is the way it should be done, but they actually had like a code word, which Tiger would have to say if he wanted his dad to stop. So this was physical, physically pushing him, mentally pushing him, and the code word was enough. You know, and Tiger would never ever say that word, like to the point that it became like such a thing that you know they would call it the E word, like it became almost like a bad word. You know
Mm-hmm.
and of course, this is
That's
on the
interesting.
complete other side of the spectrum. But it goes to show what is required, in terms of mental toughness. And there is obviously, I'm sure, a healthier way of building this. But ultimately, it's about putting yourself through it. It's about acclimatizing yourself to a difficult situation by going through it and then, trying to keep your calm and cool.
Right, right. That is where, experience comes into play too. I mean, you say he's an experienced fighter. What that means is that he's been in bad situations before and he's come out of that,
He's
right?
kept
That is
his
where
cool.
experience, yes, absolutely. Um, that's why if you look at MMA fights, you look at experienced referees, they
Mm-hmm.
give a little bit more chance to the experienced fighters, right? If an experienced fighter has been knocked down or
Mm-hmm.
he's in a bad spot getting pounded on, the referee knows that this guy has the mental toughness to come out of that. So the referee will give that a little bit more leeway to get back to his feet and fight back.
That's interesting. I actually didn't know that they do that. That's a conscious decision on their part, but it makes perfect sense. That they would, because you're right. I mean, the person has been through that before, and I think another thing, Shuman, is I've realized this is one thing that I have gained from fighting as well. By being in bad positions, let's say somebody has your back or somebody is on top of you and is in that dominating position, and you kind of keep your cool and you kind of try to get out of it. Still try to figure out, use your technique, use what you've learned, and have that discipline to not spaz out, and have that discipline to not do something stupid, and that translates into real life as well. you know uh,
Absolutely, absolutely.
when things get tough, you could just pass out. You could like, you could go like, screw this, I'm gonna go and just ignore these problems by drinking them away, or doing
Right,
something stupid. But instead, you
right.
keep your discipline, you keep your focus, you keep your eye on the prize, and you keep going.
So Chael Sonnen, uh, who was a UFC fighter, for guys who don't know, he said something very interesting.
Hmm.
He said, we often tell fighters giving up is not an option, but giving up is an option that's always there. You can always just say, you know what, I give
Hmm.
up. And not giving up is a choice, right? That is a choice that we are developing every day on the mat. That I choose to not give up. You
Wow.
can always tap out. And Jay, most of the guys who are training with us, they're not fighters, right? I mean, in the sense that they're not gonna step into a cage to compete, right?
Mm.
I mean, they're fighters in the sense that, I mean, they have the courage and the capacity of a fighter,
Hmm.
but many of them won't step into the cage to fight. What martial arts is giving them is life lessons, how to lead your life, how to be a better human being, how to be a more resilient human being, both physically and mentally.
That's absolutely true. I think that's the biggest gift it's given me, because I know I don't plan to be a world champion or anything like that, but I love training, because I miss it so much, during this lockdown, because
We all do.
yeah, we all do. How has your training been? I mean, how have you been, managing to stay fit and still, stay on top of things during the lockdown, or have things kind of, like how are things right now for you?
Um, so it has obviously been tough mentally
Mm-hmm.
because from training twice a day to uh, doing nothing, it's quite a switch, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So after the first couple of weeks, once we realized that the lockdown's probably not going to open anytime soon, because still then it was like, okay, you know what, the lockdown's going to open in 2 weeks, and then I'm going to get back to the gym and then get back in shape,
Yeah.
and then suddenly you realize that it's not going to happen anytime soon. So
Mm.
what happened was I had to accept the fact that my physical fitness level will go down, and just keep doing as much as I can so that once the gyms do start, I don't have to start from zero. Um, some people were lucky to have weights at home, or even a gym in the apartment,
Mm.
but like most of our teammates, I don't have weights at home. So I'm doing what I can with body weight. I'm just increasing the intensity with different ways. For example, if I would just do squats.
Mm-hmm.
Now, maybe I'll start off with some wall sit to pre-exhaust the muscles, then I'll do some squats, and then finish off with some jump squats. You know,
Interesting.
so
Interesting.
yeah, you just have to find different ways to up the intensity. Um, Jiu-jitsu has obviously been something that I haven't been able to practice. So other than watching jiu-jitsu videos all day and hoping to get the focus still on movements,
Right.
uh, basically jiu-jitsu training has gone from 100 to 0. And kickboxing wise, I'm still shadow boxing and all, but yeah, like whatever little bit I can do. Not the same as hitting pads or sparring, but still keeps the mind sharp.
I think, yeah, that's the most important thing. Just this thing that you said, that it's important to stay as fit as possible so that when you get back to the gym, you're not starting from zero. I think that's
Right,
uh,
right.
that's something that applies not just to fighters, but I think to everybody, you know, because it is a difficult time
Yes.
for people who like going to the gym, who like that environment, who like lifting up weights. Like it's not just about keeping fit for a lot of people. It's a space of meditation. It's a space of growth, and to not have that, it is difficult. It is difficult,
Right.
but and figuring out a way to just maintain that and figuring out a way of just because it's been the same for me. And I've one thing that I have done is I've started focusing. So when we're working as fighters, we're and we're kind of training, we have to be careful not to exhaust the muscles too much, when we're doing our strength and conditioning, just to keep it to the bare minimum, because obviously we're spending a lot more energy doing the fight training. But now that the fight training is
Right.
gone, I can actually go all the way and do some hypertrophy training. And I guess that's another which will help, I think, when the fighting training starts again. I think that'll help
Mhm.
in not just performance, but also maybe injury prevention and things like that. And I think it's a good time to work on those aspects.
Right. And I think one of the things that we need to keep in mind that when things do start, then one shouldn't try to go from 0 to 100.
Oh yeah.
They have to gradually build it up because the body is not used to the loads that it was handling before the lockdown.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
you don't want to go into the cage and put yourself under the bar with the same weights as before. You want to build it up gradually. You
Yeah.
want to start off your cardio training gradually. Like I said, a lot of focus on the aerobic stuff.
Mm.
So you have to. I mean, we all saw what happened with a sudden lockdown, right? Similarly, when we open, it shouldn't be like a sudden jump from 0 to 100. You have to do it gradually.
That's a great lesson. That's a great lesson. So are you doing any sort of online classes and stuff like that right now? Like how how is the martial arts training happening now?
Um, so yeah, I mean, I'm training with the group only. Team Relentless is training online through Zoom, so I'm
Mm-hmm.
training with them,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm training a couple of clients online, who just wanted to keep the training going, even though we can't meet personally.
Mm-hmm.
So for my own training, it's just been whatever I've been doing with Team Relentless.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And if somebody wants to get in touch with you, and work with you, because I mean, for sure, I really, really recommend to everybody that if you're looking for somebody, Shushuan is great. Like he knows his stuff. Obviously, now you can tell by the discussion that we've had today. So how should they get in touch with you, Shushuan?
So they can get in touch with me via Instagram. My Instagram handle is susovan.g. And yeah, like they can leave me a message. I'm pretty regular on Instagram, and we can communicate there.
Awesome. I'm gonna put a link to Shushowan's Instagram on the notes for this podcast, so you can just scroll down and probably find it somewhere over there. Shushowan, it was, I think, really, really fun discussion, man. I mean, we really went into it. There were a lot of other things I wanted to discuss with you as well. Maybe we can get into that next time. We've not talked a lot about nutrition today, but I think
Right.
that's another topic that is going to be huge. And if we start that, we'll probably go on for another hour. Because you and me, we've had these discussions in the past, and a lot of things going wrong, and in
Right.
the fitness industry right now when it comes to nutrition, a lot of misconceptions, and man, it's frustrating. But I think we should reserve that for another time.
For sure. For sure.
It was so awesome to have you, and I'm looking forward to having you over in the show again. Uh, Really, it was fantastic. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Ushoman.
It was a pleasure for me also, Jay. Nice talking to you, and hope to chat with you soon.